to Bilingual Book Buddies. Bilingual Book Buddies is dedicated to promoting bilingual books for children and sharing insights from authors, illustrators, editors, agents, and anyone involved in bringing these stories to life. I'm Claudia Sloan. I'm one of 3 co-hosts of Bilingual Book Buddies. I'm an artist who also writes and illustrates books for children. One of my goals in doing so is to help increase access to good quality bilingual and Spanish language children's literature. I've illustrated and translated several books for other authors, and I have written and illustrated 2 picture books of my own. In fact, one of them is my newest bilingual picture book titled We Are the Valley, Somos el Valle, which was an amazing collaboration with my favorite NBA and WNBA professional basketball teams, the Phoenix Suns and the Phoenix Mercury. And now I have a pleasure to welcome my 2 co-hosts who are going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to welcome a special guest. Alicia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Alicia Salazar, children's book author and one of your hosts here on Bilingual Book Buddies. I write stories for kids because I believe books have the power to help children see themselves, understand others, and discover the courage already inside them. I'm the author of the Camilla the Star early chapter book series and the 2025 book Cascarones, An Easter Surprise. Through my work as an author and through school visits and writing workshops, I've seen firsthand how powerful stories can. I'm so excited to be part of this podcast. Stories that bring languages, cultures, and communities together.
Thank you, Alicia. I am Silvia Lopez. I am Cuban-American author living in Miami, Florida. I retired as a library media specialist after many years, and then I turned that knowledge and love of reading and children into writing my own books for children. I have published about 20 picture books. Many of them are bilingual. Most of them are bilingual. I have biographies, easy readers, folktale retellings, and nonfiction. So I have 4 books coming out between 2026 and 2027.
Thank you both for your introductions. And now I have the pleasure to introduce our special guest. Our special guest is DavidBowles. And David, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yes, that's right, Claudia.
Excellent. Well, I have a little bit of bio that I grabbed from your website, and then you can tell us a little more if I leave anything out, but then we'll get started. So David is a queer Mexican-American author and translator from South Texas, where he works as an associate professor at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. Among his more than 40 books are the multiple award-winning They Call Me Güero and his companion They Call Her Fregona, as well as my 2 border towns, Ancient Night and Secret of the Moon Conch and The Prince and the Coyote. His work has also been published in multiple anthologies, plus venues such as the New York Times, Strange Horizons, Apex Magazine, School Library Journal, Rattle, Translation Review, and the Journal of Children's Literature. Additionally, David has worked on several TV and film projects, including Victor and Valentino for the Cartoon Network, the Moctezuma and Cortez miniseries for Amazon, and Monsters and Mysteries in America, Discovery. So welcome, David. I know you have a very broad background, and I'm just totally excited because I didn't read it on the bio, but I know you're also a musician, you're also a poet, and he translates in so many, in several languages that I could tell. So we are totally honored to have you here with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Claudia. It's a delight to be here. Anytime I get to chat about children's literature, I jump at the opportunity. It's one of my most favorite things to talk about.
Great. It's wonderful, David. I have the honor of asking you the very first question here. It's my privilege. Let's start at the beginning. Can you walk us through your journey as children's book author and your experience getting your first children's book published?
Sure. I mean, when I started as an author, It was kind of on the heels of having been a middle school teacher for many years and having kind of collected a series of short stories that I had created with my students that were adaptations of folk tales I had grown up with, mostly stories that my grandmother Garza had told me when I was a kid, spooky legends and that kind of thing. La Llorona, las lechuzas, la mano pachona, these horrifying Mexican legends that were a delight to me as a kid. And so because of my experience working with that age of reader, a lot of my early work, um, a collection of short stories being my first book, and then several other books about folktales, were all about trying to reach kids at that level, the middle grade to YA level. As I progressed as a writer, it seemed almost like fate was drawing me lower and lower in reading level so that I was starting off with like adult and YA stuff and then middle grade. And then I was invited to co-author a book with Adam Gidwist from his Unicorn Rescue Society series, which was for lower middle grade. And then I eventually got, because of that, invited to work on a chapter book series for HarperCollins to launch their Harper Chapters line of chapter books. And so that was when I did 13th Street, which is these 6 chapter books. These experiences led to my agents suggesting to me that I try my hand at doing a picture book. Specifically, my agents, and I say agents because I work with 2 different people at Full Circle Literary. One of them is Taylor, and the other is Stephanie. And Taylor is really a little more focused on my, yeah, there you go, mis dos pueblos fronterizos. That's the first one right there. Stephanie focuses a little more on children's literature, and they're the ones who came to me with the idea. They said, you've got this book they call me Güero. It was a middle grade novel in verse that is it's my most successful book. It's ridiculously successful. I'm so blessed. It's sold more than 200,000 copies now. It's really a really marvelous book. And they said the character in this book has this experience with his father of going across the border to visit family and so forth and to come back. And do you use that as a way to both celebrate the border and to talk about some of the difficulties that the border presents to people who live along it? Would you be willing to try something like that for the picture book audience? And so I took that very first poem, a Border Kid, or Chavo de Frontera, and used it as the baseline to create a picture book, kind of imagining that same character just a lot younger and what that journey would be like. And at the time, my then wife and I were crossing a lot. I live in Donna, Texas, which is right across the border from Rio Bravo, Tamaulipas, on the Mexican side. And we have lots of friends there, and I have family in Reynosa. And so going across the border is kind of a tradition with us. But during the time that my agents were proposing this, there were a lot of asylum seekers from Central America and Mexico and also the Caribbean, kind of in line there at the border, like basically camping out on the pedestrian crossing between the 2 cities. And our experiences with those people and getting to know them and bringing them, food and water and filling their prescriptions or whatever, kind of led to my imagining what would it have been like for my children, who were all adults at that time, if they were with us when we were doing this. How would they have reacted? And so that kind of mixture of ideas, the first poem from They Call Me Güero, and this experience I was having, kind of created the alchemy that I needed for this book. It was, as you will remember, a very contentious time in the United States, with children being essentially caged, with very little warmth, sleeping on floors with, like flimsy blankets. And it was just a horrible, horrible time, that has only gotten progressively worse since, unfortunately. And it was just one of those things where you respond to the moment with all of your heart and all of your creativity, and with as much honesty as you can, and you create something and people respond to it. So it was my first picture book, but it went to a five-way auction. I don't know if your listeners will be familiar with this, but sometimes what will happen is like your agent will take your manuscript and will send it out to multiple different editors saying, "Hey, I've got a new project from David, and this is what it's about. Here's some samples. If you want to see more." With a picture book, you can send the entire manuscript relatively easily. Um, and then you'll get, a bunch of people will say, "Oh, well, that's kind of interesting, but it kind of have to pass, and whatever." And if you're lucky, there will be one person that'll be like, "Oh yeah, I really am interested. Can we talk?" If you're super lucky, a bunch of people will say, "Hey, I'm really interested and I want it." And then you go to auction, which is you give everybody a chance to submit an offer, and then you get to pick the best offer. And it doesn't happen very often, and so you know that you have a very special project when it does, because it means that it's resonating in a way that's going to make the book successful. So we ended up going with Coquila, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House, and Joanna Cardenas there was the editor, and she, one of the things that really clinched it for us was that we really wanted to simultaneously release it in English and in Spanish, and she was absolutely in favor of that. She's like, "Yes, that is definitely part of my vision." And so she and I set about making the edits that would create the very best version of the text. And she also asked me at that point, she goes, "Look, I know this might be a little unusual, but do you have recommendations for an illustrator?" Because another thing that your viewers should know is that it's often the case that the publisher just picks an illustrator and the author doesn't have a whole lot to say. But I happened to have been thinking about it a lot, and I wanted somebody from the border, an illustrator from the border, and one person whose work had caught my eye was Erika Mesa, from the originally from like well, she's not originally from, like she spent her teen years in the Tijuana, San Diego area. She now lives in the United Kingdom. But yeah, she does really amazing work. And so I said Erika Flores, and it was funny because Joanna Cardenas had also been thinking about Erika Flores, and so she was the person. And you could see here some of these amazing images. We were able to, again, something unusual, talk a lot on the phone together, and it's kind of just kind of amusing because when we speak Spanish, we both are speaking, contemporary Mexican Spanish, northern, like border Spanish. It's got particular rhythms and slang and so forth that resonates whether you're from Tamaulipas or from Coahuila or from Baja California. You talk in a similar way. And so when we're speaking in Spanish, it feels like really cool. And then she switches to English and she's like, "Oh, David, I don't know whether that," and I'm like, "Oh my God, please just switch back to Spanish because your British accent is freaking me." But it was a really lovely collaboration, and I sent her a bunch of references from here, and she pulled from her own experience and created this kind of like almost like an encyclopedia or glossary, or I don't even know how to put it, but of all these individual places that she was drawing from different sources and from her own memory, so that she could then pull them out and put them together to create this kind of fictional version of a border town. And there's that one spread that Claudia was showing a little while ago. It's so full of color, and there are all these Easter eggs so that you can look at that page over and over and over again. It's like a spread of the Mexican town, and it's just full of references to Mexican cinema, to just all kinds of really, really incredible things. That's the one right there. And oh my gosh, I've looked at it so many times, and it feels like I find something new every single time. It's really, really great. But yeah, I mean, that was really it. And the book came out and did well, and it won several awards, like the Tomas Rivera Mexican American Children's Book Award that I'm going to be going up to San Marcos for the 30th anniversary of. It's going to be kind of nice. I've won that award twice, for Güero and for my two border towns. And it's done really well. Now, it's also been banned. It was banned and thrown onto the trash can, to the dumpster rather, of a elementary school at Staten Island in New York. A whole bunch of them were, along with books by other people. And it unfortunately had like a post-it note on the cover that apparently when whoever was reviewing the books and deciding that they wanted to get rid of them had put, because there's a part in the towards the end of the book where the kid is talking to his dad, and he's really sad that he can't bring his friend, whom he said this little Cuban boy who's on the board with his family, that he can't bring him to his house, that he's got to continue waiting there. And um, his dad tells him, "Look, I know it's not fair. I know that we have room for them, and it's unfortunate they have to wait, but eventually they will have their chance to state their case, and when they are able to come across, we'll invite them with open arms." And somebody had put on this post-it note, "There is no room, and that's just too bad," or something, words to that effect. It was just such a devastating attitude to have for a children's book, especially one like this that is just about a kid who loves being a part of a border community, loves being a chavo fronterizo, and wants other people to experience that joy as well of having two different towns and two different countries and going back and forth. And there's a sense that, like, we all know, right? The whole like los borrachos y los niños dicen la verdad, that kind of thing, right? You know, drunks and children can always tell the truth. And, there's a truthfulness that comes from looking through the eyes of an innocent when they look at a thing and they're like, this is not fair. There's no justice in this. How do you adults live with yourselves, like, permitting this? And it just cuts through all of the nonsense and all the lies we tell ourselves about what we can afford and what is fair and so forth. And they just see the truth. And so that makes people uncomfortable sometimes to read a book like this and to see the truth, just laid bare by innocent eyes. But I thought it was important. I thought it was important for us to think about the perspective of a child as we move forward. And it's still clearly really important because, the way we're treating children is horrific, not to mention how we're treating the adults.
What has had the biggest influence in your writing? Is it a culture? Is it your background, a cultural experience, a person? Is there anything that has had really an outstanding influence in your life?
Yeah, I would say that there are three major things that shape my writing. One of them is my background and the fact that I come from a family of storytellers, like I've mentioned before. I wouldn't have even my grandmother's storytelling is what got me started reading, because she was like, I was always asking questions, and she was like, "Look, a mí se me acabaron los cuentos. I have no more stories to tell you. So if you want more, if you want the answers to all these weird questions you ask, you need to learn to read." And so by the time I was 5 years old, I was reading because of her influence and pushing me to read. So that was definitely like instrumental. And when I'm writing, it's always rooted in that experience of communal storytelling. The second thing that I think shaped it was the lack of books by Latines so I'm 56 years old. So like when I was in elementary, it was the 70s, and I was in high school in the 80s. And there was a dearth of books by US Latine writers. We had some exposure to Latin American authors and to, Hispanic writers in the sense of like Hispano-American, you know, um, from Spain and Portugal and so forth. But there wasn't really anything built into the curriculum written by people in the US of Latin American heritage. And the realization that that was true when I got into college also kind of radicalized me and made me want to do this sort of work. And then the third thing is like being a father. And I have three children. They're all adults, 33-year-old, 28-year-old, 25-year-old, and now two grandchildren, two grandsons. And I know it's so great to be a grandfather. It's amazing. It's like all the pleasure of enjoying the children and none of the responsibilities. Like the kids get too much, you just hand them right back to their parents. But like, you know, dealing with my own children and with my grandsons in terms of, just everyday interactions, understanding what they're interested in, what matters to them, but also like reading to them, telling them stories before they go to bed. Those kinds of things have shaped like my way of thinking about storytelling as well, and the importance that the actual identity of the child plays in the storytelling and in the selection of a book to read before bedtime.
Well, you clearly are doing a lot of things right. It shows on your work, the quality of your work, and the world is recognizing it by the awards that you're receiving. So congratulations. I do have the next question, and This is going to take us a little bit more into your translation work. So, in addition to writing children's books, you are also a professional translator. You've done Spanish translations of many children's books, including the popular Rainbow Fish and the recently published Spanish version of Gloria Amezcua's book titled Child of the Flower Song People, illustrated by Duncan Donatiu. By the way, we had both of them here separately on different podcasts, and they are amazing people, and their work is beautiful, fabulous. But most importantly, you also do Nahuatl translations. For those who don't know, Nahuatl is an ancient Aztec language, which is very unusual. I thought it was very unusual. So tell us more about all of these translation work, whichever you want to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued.
I'll touch on all of that. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, so I grew up bilingual. My mom isn't Mexican American. My dad's Mexican, and so I grew up, with both languages. But I mean, what happens when, you are the child of somebody who is highly bilingual and comes from a family where some people only speak Spanish, and then you grow up is sometimes your Spanish is not as proficient as you might like it to be. So, I grew up speaking like what we call in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, Pocho Spanish. Or, it's kind of like the Spanish that's highly infused with English words, whatever. But Spanish was really important to me. And, when I would go visit relatives in Reynosa, I would get corrected a lot. And I became aware at an early age that there was a version of Spanish that I wanted to master that I wasn't quite there yet. And so by the time I was in high school and we got to take, Spanish as an elective, or I guess we were in the 80s, we had to take Spanish. We had to take some foreign language. I took it and then, went on to study it in college and so forth, and became, I guess you would say, bidialectical, so that I had my like native kind of, Pocho Spanish dialect, and then I had like layered on top of that, Mexican Spanish, Northern Mexican Spanish. And so when I became a writer, it was very important to me that my work be put out in both languages. And so the my second book, which was called Mexican Beastry, came out. It was kind of like an illustrated encyclopedia of like cucuys, like little monsters and so forth from Mexico and the U.S. Southwest. And it was like bilingual, so side by side English and Spanish versions of these things. And it became super important to me that all my work for kids be accessible in English and in Spanish. Sometimes I would write stuff for like teens or adults that I just wasn't able to swing getting a Spanish translation of it. But for the most part, that was really important to me. I wanted, because I know, I mean, I've lived my entire life in South Texas and a couple of years in Mexico as well, in Monterrey and in Oaxaca. And I know how important it is for families that are multilingual, in which there are some people who are bilingual, some people are monolingual in Spanish, some are monolingual in English, to have access to both languages if they're going to have conversations around books, if they're going to treat literacy as a cornerstone of family life, which it should be, in my opinion. And so that I just made it, I don't know how to explain it. I just made it like a plank in my platform of professional work that I needed to do Spanish stuff. And so because of the recognition that I was getting for my Spanish versions of my own work, eventually publishers started saying, "Hey, would you be interested in like translating somebody else's work?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, why not? Of course. I think that would be wonderful." And so opportunities began to arise, and I was able to do some really amazing things. Friends of mine like Ernesto Cisneros, who's A Friend Divided, was such a wonderful book. He, wanted, this is a middle grade book, right? He wanted desperately for there to be a Spanish translation of it. And more than anything, and this like really like touched me, he wanted it so his mother could read his book. So his mother, the book is about his mother. It was a fictionalized version of his mother being deported and all the things that his family went to as a result of it. He wanted her to be able to read it because she can't read in English. And I still remember sending him like the Word document of the final translation, and he like literally printed it out and took it to his mom so she could read it. And she was overwhelmed and like started crying. And I was like, see, that's why I'm doing it. This is why you do what you do, because you want people to have those experiences. You want them to be able to share the story. It doesn't need to be just contained in that original language. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had the opportunity to work with Gloria, who I love so dearly and have known for quite some time. Um, with other really great writers. The interpreter by Olivia Aptai is a book that I translated into Spanish as La Intérprete, and it just got recognized as by the Bank Street College of Education's children's book committee as best book in Spanish for the year, whatever. And those kinds of things make me feel really good. And it was what led me to do Ancient Night, which is my, also my second picture book, in English and Spanish as well. And Ancient Night is this really unusual situation where it was in Mexico, it was published as a wordless picture book. And then Levine Querido, Arthur Levine's new publishing company, relatively new publishing company, acquired the translation rights for it, right? So, but here's the question: what do you translate if it's a wordless picture book? So, it was one of the situations where, okay, look, we got the translation rights. So what we need is for you to come up with a text in English and in Spanish to accompany the illustrations, which is like completely backwards from the way things would normally
Yes.
work. But it was really cool. So it was like this, here's the art, and I'm coming up with the text. And sometimes I'm coming up with the Spanish first, sometimes coming up with the English first, and then having to translate like this part into English, this part into Spanish. Just what an amazing experience. It like set my brain on fire in a good way. It was just like this lovely, lovely thing. Such beautiful art by David Alvarez.
Beautiful.
And so, I just relish it. And right now I'll be honest with you right now, it's a little bit hard. I've been trying to sell another book, and we've got different things out in submission, but the opportunities to translate keep coming up. And I keep accepting them because it's important work. And I want to do it. Now, as to Nahuatl is as Claudia said, is to give you some context for people who have no idea. Um, Nahuatl is an indigenous language that's had a huge influence on Mexican Spanish. And one of the major sources of the dialectical differences between Mexican Spanish and, say, Caribbean Spanish or Argentinian Spanish or Colombian Spanish is the influence of Nahuatl, which was a lingua franca of Mesoamerica, all of what is now Mexico and Central America, when the Spanish invaded. And so most indigenous languages had the influence of Nahuatl, and for 100 years after the Spanish invasion, the Spanish crown and the Catholic Church used Nahuatl as a missionary language as well. So the Bible was translated into Nahuatl. It was just used all over the place. And Nahuatl is still spoken today by about 1.5 million people living in Mexico and in Central America. But it's kind of evolved over 500 years, and it's a different language, and there are like different varieties of it. And what I am a scholar of is classical Nahuatl, which is Nahuatl as it was spoken at the time of the conquest. And I've done a lot of work writing in it, translating from it, and I got interested in it because it is like a heritage language, and some of the indigenous people who settled northern Mexico and deep South Texas were Tlaxcalteca. They were Tlaxcalans, which is a Nahuatl-speaking group that were allied with the Spanish against the Mexica and the rest of the Aztec Empire. And so it is, it's an ethnic group and a linguistic group that had a huge influence. And a lot of people who live in this area have ancestry that is Tlaxcalteca Nahua because they were used. They were asked to go to Coahuila and Tamaulipas and other places to help, it sounds terrible, basically to quell indigenous uprisings and to get the different indigenous people of the borderlands to to go along and to join the missions and to allow settlement and so forth. And they were good at what they did. And so I guess it's kind of uncomfortable. Like every Mexican American would prefer to be descended from like Mexica warriors or whatever. But the truth is, like, there's some of us who are descended from their enemies who helped the Spanish, but they still spoke Nahuatl, and it's still kind of like a thing of cultural heritage. And so, I became interested in it when I was in college, and then just gradually started studying it bit by bit as I could. There's like, at the time, there was no place where you could just go study. So I studied on my own. And eventually just like one thing led to another. And then I had a book of translated poems come out, and I guess it was 2013, from Lamar University Press, called Flower Song Dance, Aztec and Maya Poetry. And that won a translation award and stuff like that. And I've gone on to do more translation, and to more than anything, to be like a cultural consultant on a lot of different books whenever they're using Nahuatl, or they're using cultural elements from the pre-Columbian Mesoamerican Nahua groups that we often refer to as the Aztec Empire. So I mean, it's again a privilege to be able to help people to tell the stories as accurately as possible and as respectfully as possible. There's a lot of misinformation. A lot of people, misunderstand all kinds of things. And so to be somebody who's like, okay, calm down. The Aztecs were just like normal people, just living normal lives. They weren't they weren't like amazing, wonderful, like godlike beings. And they weren't like bloodthirsty, horrible savages either. They were just normal people. Let's just talk about them as human beings, please. And, that's part of translation work, right? Is conveying the truth about the culture whose language you're translating.
I had no idea that that there was a book of translated poems from the Aztecs. So that was wonderful.
Yeah.
So my next question includes that a little, because it says, you are also a poet, a musician, and a fellow podcaster. Can you please tell us a little bit about your work in those areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being a poet is like the one thing that I continue to be and have been for a very long time. Poetry was one of like the very first things that I started writing when I was in my early teens, and it was really convenient. I lived in Section 8 housing, like the projects basically, and didn't have a whole lot of money, and there's not a whole lot you can do with food stamps. When you're like wanting to date people, but like if you can write a poem, there, it could smooth over a lot of poverty.
Yes.
If you're like, can be like, here to the person that you're kind of like crushing on, here's a poem for you. But yeah, no, poetry, is, I think it underlies everything I do. I tend to write very lyrically. My editors are always having to my agents first, and then editors afterwards, having to pull me away from being overly lyrical. They're like, dial the poetry back, dial it down. But yeah, there's something about poetry, and that's one of the reasons that they call me Güero. Again, my most successful book, which is about a 12-year-old boy discovering the power of poetry and using it to grapple with his problems, is like so near and dear to my heart, because there is his literature teacher tells him, poetry is the clearest lens for viewing the world. And I still think that's true. There's like a compression, emotional compression, and like immediacy, and also like a flensing away of the unimportant extras so that you get at the core of things that poetry affords you. And so I love it very much. And I have a couple of poetry collections. My first one, which is called Shattering and Bricolage, was actually this is the one thing that made me kind of like famous in my own community finally, was that I was quoted on Criminal Minds, that TV show. It was a TV show that at the end of every episode there would be like a quote from some book or whatever. And one episode they quoted a poem from Shattering and Bricolage. And so the character's like that. When wounds are healed by love, the scars are beautiful. DavidBowles. And like all my phone blew up, all my social media, all these people locally in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas who had up to this point been like, oh, he's an author, whatever. Like, oh, he's an author. He's being quoted on TV, which is like what like matters to non-readers, right? It's like, is your work getting you in TV? So, yeah, poetry is really, really important to me. And I had a book of poetry come out, I think just like last spring, called Liminal, which is collected poems from the past like 10 years, whatever. But yeah, no,
That's
I'm a
wonderful.
musician. I do I don't get to spend as much time making music as I used to, but I come from a very musical family, and I learned how to play. I got piano lessons when I was a kid, and then my dad taught me how to play the guitar, and I was a percussionist when I was in middle school. I've just always had a love for music, and I think a lot of it is connected to poetry, like songwriting, and writing poetry are so interconnected.
So you
But yeah,
write
the
your own
podcast.
songs too. You
Yeah,
write
yeah,
your own
yeah. I
songs.
did. Like when I was a teenager, I actually had I had a band. It was a
Oh
Christian
wow.
rock band. Christian rock in the 1980s was like super popular. Um, and so we all liked rock, and there was a bunch of us that went to the same church, and we decided to start a band. And we played at different like venues throughout South Texas at like um, camps, and so there was like a battle of the band at McAllen Memorial High School that we played in, and it was nice. It was a nice couple of years when I was 17 and 18 years old. The But yeah, I think music also is just something that underlies my work. The Prince and the Coyote, which is a novel historical fiction about Nezahualcóyotl, who, as a teenager, went on the run from an empire that had killed his father. This was in the early 1400s, and survived in the wilderness and up on the volcanoes of Iztaccíhuatl and Popocatépetl and so forth, um, and eventually made his way out to his uncles in Tenochtitlan, and together they overthrew the empire that had killed his father and established the Aztec Empire. It's like a really amazing story, and he was a teenager when all this happened. But he's like one of the only indigenous people of the Americas whose poetry or song lyrics, however you want to look at it, has survived, and we know, and there's a name ascribed to them. And so, he's one of the people that has always fascinated me. And this book was about him, but because he was a musician, I also get to pull in all this stuff about music that I love and to use it as a key to understanding his personality, his strategy and warfare, and all that stuff. And yeah, so music is really, really key. And as for podcasting, I've tried to do a couple of different podcasts. Like you ladies are much better at it than I am. So I would be embarrassed to even start talking about it because you're masterful, very, very well prepared and structured. But podcasting definitely is a way to reach an audience that might not otherwise be reachable. And so I love podcasts, love listening to them. And have been trying to get caught up on previous episodes of this one, and just loving what you do. So
Yay.
kudos to you. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
A follow-up question. How do you do it all? The tools or practices, what tools or practices do you recommend to other creatives who have talents and ideas but struggle to find the time to do it all?
Yeah, that's the big dilemma, isn't it? Um, I will be honest with you. I have an unusual like personality and just like way of living my life. And so like my answer is not going to be perfect for everybody, but it is what like worked for me. And so I always tell people to consider it at least. And it is like if you want to do this, like just like about anything in life that you want to do. If you want to do this and you also have to keep your regular job and you have family, whatever, you have to be willing to sacrifice something. And I know that's horrible to say, and like nobody really wants to hear it. They would like to hear that there's a way to squeeze this in. And I suppose there kind of is. If you're willing to take several years to produce a book, then one thing to keep in mind is if you just write, you know, between 30 minutes and an hour every day, you can get a lot done. You can, over the say you say you only write a page a day, that's in a year that's 365 pages. That's a lot of writing. And you should give yourself, the opportunity to take your time if you need it. But if you're really serious and you feel driven, what I used to do was to figure out what moments of time were freest for me. We're going to um, be there with no interruptions, where I would be able to focus. And for me, that was early in the morning. So I started when I was a full-time teacher and I had three kids. And occasionally I was teaching as an adjunct faculty member at the university, like a class in the evenings. So I didn't have a whole lot of time, but I was also willing to get up early. And so I would, and this is, some people are not going to like this, I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, make myself coffee, sit down in front of my computer, and do some writing, probably about an hour's worth of writing. Um, Once I had been doing it, when I would get up in the morning, I would have things to review from the previous day. And the idea would be that I would write something in the morning, 5 until 6 or so, and then take a shower and get my kids ready and off to work. And then evening, right before I would go to bed, I would look over what I wrote in the morning, make some notes to myself, some tweaks or whatever, and then I would go to bed. I would be asleep by 10:30, and then up again at 5. And I did that for 15 years. And it became like my habit. It became the thing that I knew I needed to do. I don't know that I could have lived and been happy without doing that. And so it was like a sacrifice that meant something for me because, being a teacher, those of you who are teachers who have been teachers can attest to this. It's difficult and you love what you're doing, but it's hard because, you know, there are all kinds of barriers to student success, and students are going through so much, and then there's all this kind of bureaucratic nonsense. And the thing that kept me sane was the creative work that I was doing every morning. It energized me and made me happier and more willing to take on the rest of the day. I didn't have a book published until I was 40 years old. Um, but I was patient and I took the time and I worked on different projects until like what eventually happened was that the very stories that I was creating for my students became my first book rather than any of the other projects I had been working on, like novels and things like that. Um, so, I mean, that's what I would say. No, there's no need for anybody to sugarcoat it to you. Those of you who are aspiring writers and illustrators, number one, it's a tough market to break into. Number two, doing the work that's required just to create the work means that other things in your life have to either be minimized or have to go. During those 15 years, I didn't have like my compadres that I would go hang out with and a weekend or watch sports with, or like, I didn't like do a bunch of extra stuff. I had my kids and my wife, and then I had my writing, and that was it. Because sometimes that's what it takes. People always ask me, "Oh my God, you have so much success," and I do, and a lot of it has just been the blessings of the universe and you know issues of fate and accidental meeting the right people at the right time, whatever. But at the very heart of it, it's just been work. It is work. This thing that we do, it is work. And if you're willing to do the work, then and not give up and just keep plugging away at it, you will eventually break in. But I don't want to make it sound any easier than it actually is to anybody. I would hate to give somebody this false perspective that it's going to be smooth sailing. And it's one of the reasons, like in recent times, people have opted to do things like self-publish and so forth, because there are ways in which you can have more control and you're not at the whims of other people, but you also forego like the distribution networks that publishers use and so forth when you self-publish. And anyway, so
But the bottom line is that they still have to do the work.
they still have to do the
They
work,
still
even
have
self-published.
right.
Arguably, Claudia, arguably self-publishing means even more work because
Yes.
in the absence of a distribution network, you are your distributor. You're the person who has to like convince different outlets to carry your book, and you're the one who has to make the phone calls, stuff like that. You're the one who has to like find the illustrator, find the cover designer. It's like a lot of work. So no matter what pathway you go, whether it's traditional or indie or self-publishing, you are going to have to put in the work, and there's just no getting around it.
Yes,
And
that's true.
and when I see things, I'm sure that the three of you will agree with me. When I see things like people using AI to like churn out children's books
Oh,
like
no, no,
like
no. But
every
you
month or
can
whatever.
tell on,
It's a
yeah.
big problem
Right away.
nowadays.
Yeah.
But
Obviously
yeah.
the quality is terrible. They have nothing to do with actual children's books, and so yeah.
Fortunately, we're still at the place where we can identify. You can tell when it was created
Mhm.
by AI.
Yeah, you can.
But I think
Who knows what it'll be like in the future, right?
yes, yes, we cannot talk about the future, but thank you for that though, because I think the message that resonates with me from all these is that you still have to put in the time, and if you're passionate enough about it, you will put in the time.
Yeah, you will.
As writers, we do have a saying, and this came from I first heard it from Jane Jolin, a very famous writer, and we're really lucky to have her. Workshops and so forth. But she said, "But in chair," simple as that.
I love it. Butt in chair.
But in chair.
Yeah.
So, but thank you for that. So well, as we have seen today, and from all these stories that you share in your writings, all these different genres, and poetry as well, and different languages and so forth. So you have all these varieties. So from all your types of writing, which one is your favorite?
Wow, that's really hard. I think that probably novel writing is my favorite. Probably writing novels for older readers, for adults or whatever, is my favorite. But it's also like the most time consuming of them all. Um, it's and I maybe that's why I like it the most because it's the most complex. It's the most time consuming. It means like holding in your head, you know, 55 to 100,000 words of story, like with complex interconnections and so forth. And so it's like the difference between like building, your a little doghouse and building an entire human house, right? It's like a lot of the same issues exist in miniature when you're doing short stories or when you're writing a picture book. And picture books are difficult in their own way. Picture books I mean, there's something about picture books that's harder than writing like 100,000 word novel because you've got,
Well, it's
five.
the other way though, because you have to reduce the number of words and pick
Yeah,
them very carefully.
yeah, and you have to be careful not to say in words things that your illustrator is going to convey with illustrations, and so it's writing a children's book. I've recently my third picture book is out on sub and crossed my fingers that somebody likes it. Who knows in this climate that we're in right now? But it just takes me longer to write them. It literally takes me longer to write a children's book than it takes me to write a
Yes,
60,000 word novel because it's just like every word counts in a way that's not true
exactly.
with a huge novel. And so yeah, I mean, I think I have more fun with writing novels. Writing things that are shorter is perhaps more rewarding in the long term, but it is more work. It's more
More
work to write a
work.
single poem or a children's book than it is to write. Like there are gonna be people who don't believe me, but it trust me. It when you write both of them, you can see the difference.
Yes.
But I don't think that I would ever like just write one thing or another. I do, I've been spending a lot of time writing like adult science fiction stories and publishing some of them, and I'm working on some adult novels. And the kid market right now is kind of because of book banning and other socio-political things that are going on in our country. It's getting a little bit tougher. Fewer schools in red states are buying books in bulk by people who are who are from communities of color,
Mhm.
right? To put it as bluntly as I can. Um, and so it's a little bit tougher. The publishers are having to think very carefully about what they acquire and so forth. So some of us have been like, okay, well, I've been thinking about moving into the adult market, so maybe this is the time to do it. When you are doing it, when you're looking at it from the business perspective. So after like basically 2 decades now, like writing is an important part of my like family's economy of my writing is. And so it's like I can't just be like, oh, I've published 40 books, that's enough, and I'll hang up my hat. Like, no, like my like the economic infrastructure of my family will collapse if that's true, if that were to happen. So now it's not just a matter of like, what do I want to write? It's like, what can I get published?
Right.
And yeah, and so those are like really difficult. things to face, but it's the kind of world we live in. And prospective writers and illustrators who are listening to us need to keep that in mind. There are ways to write what the market wants from you that perhaps you wouldn't have initially chosen, but that still resonate with all the themes and textures and cultural elements that are important to you. You could still weave those in. So don't turn your nose up at the opportunities just because they're not exactly what you wanted to write.
Right. That's a wonderful way of putting it, David. And also, as we have mentioned here in this program before, and we have heard it all around, things don't get published immediately. Things are published in 2 or 3 years. Sometimes it takes from the inception of the idea that you have in your head to actually seeing that book in print. And so you have to kind of keep in mind future demands that are not, maybe, like you say, nowadays, there are some trends, but those trends change, pendulums swing. And so if you are passionate and you love what you write, keep it because it may come back. I mean,
Yeah, you
things
may
do
become
come
the
back.
trendsetter. Exactly. You may
That's
become the
right.
trendsetter.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. What a wonderful answer. So I think we have one last one, right? Alicia, you're going to do the last
Yes,
question. This is an
yes.
important one.
What's your latest and or future projects, if you can share with us today?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I have right now the the third book in the middle grade graphic novel series, Tales of the Feathered Serpent. It's coming out in June, I think June 16th. It's called The Hero Twins in the Realm of Fright, and it continues the story from the Popol Vuh of the Hero Twins, the Maya Hero Twins, Xbalanque and Hunapu, who in this conclusion of the kind of like 2 book story. Most of the graphic novels in the series are standalone, but this is connected to book 2, in that it's got most of the same characters returning, but just on a different adventure. They descend to the underworld to rescue their father. Hilarious book with great illustrations from my daughter, Charlene, which is really, I still am amazed that I got to work with my daughter on this series. It's so great. And we're working on the 4th one already, and that's going to be coming out in 2027. So yeah, great. I love that series and just the ability to retell these Mesoamerican stories with um, like a tone and a visual style that young readers who are fans of comics and manga and stuff like that are going to immediately go, oh yeah, I get it. That's really cool. Then I've got my translation of Guadalupe Garcia McCall's the second book in her new trilogy called The Seasons of Sisterhood. It's in English, it's called the Spring of the Cicada, and I'm going to be translating that into Spanish. I think I'm supposed to get the manuscript pretty soon. That's going to be coming out next year, the Spanish version of it. I guess the English and Spanish are coming out simultaneously next year. That'll be really, really awesome. Can I say this? Who's going to say anything if I say it? They haven't announced it yet, so I don't know if I should say it. I am translating some kind of famous picture books. Gosh, no one's told me I can't say it. What do you think? Should I say it?
No, it's okay. You know what? It's going to be,
I'll tell you what.
wonderful.
People are gonna. So I will give people a hint. That's what I'll give them hints.
Okay, that works.
I have worked with this illustrator before, and these are books that he illustrated. So all you can put your kind of like, you do a little investigative work, and you will like know what books I'm translating. So I'm really excited about this series of really beloved. I guess you would call them. They're like a blend of picture book and graphic novel. They're really, really neat. My next year I've got the second book, the continuing graphic novels. It feels like I'm doing a bunch of graphic novels right now. In the Clockwork Curandera graphic novel duology. It's finally coming out next year, Robots of the Republic from Lee and Low. And so I'm super excited about that from the 2 books imprint of Lee and Low. It has been, you were talking about waiting years for a book to come out. Lee and Low they acquired the script to Clockwork Curandera in 2016 And we were finally going to put out the final volume in the story next year in 2027. Sometimes this stuff happens. The original illustrator, that's part of the clue, uh, had to drop out of the project, and so a new illustrator was hired, and then that person had dropped out, and so we had to get another illustrator because we needed somebody who could mimic the style of the first book. It was very complicated. Oh man, what a headache! But people are. It's been well worth the wait, I hope. I think we were really excited about Robots of the Republic, the second volume of the Clockwork Curandera duology. Um, and yeah, I mean, my further translations of the Rainbow Fish books will keep coming out, a couple every year. So the kids who love those should keep their eye out for it. And hopefully I'll have something to report on my own original picture books soon. I guess I have two picture book manuscripts out right now. So cross my fingers and let's just hope that it happens. Um,
Exciting. You have a lot going on. This is
yeah.
exciting. So before we leave this topic, just tell us your website for those who are only listening, because I'm gonna have it on the screen, but uh, just say what your website is and which social media platform you want them to find you at.
Absolutely. So my website is davidbowles.us. My last name is spelled Bowles. So davidbowles.us. And you can find me on most social media platforms, Instagram, Blue Sky. I think I have a TikTok account that I don't even really use, but you could find some videos there. And on Facebook as well. And it's usually at David O. Bowles. O standing for Oscar. So I'm David Oscar. Oscar.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So
Well,
yeah,
thank you very much, David. This brings us to the conclusion of our episode with you. But before we go, there's three questions we ask of every guest. These are our rapid fire questions. And so just answer whatever comes to mind first. So, what's one fact about you that even your biggest fans might not know?
ooh. One fact about me that my even my biggest fans might not know is that I love to play chess. Hmm.
If others were to describe you in one, two, or three words, what would those words be?
Hmm. They might say aloof, grumpy, stuck up. But they would be wrong because I just have resting intellectual idiot face. I like have this people are like, "Are you okay? Or are you angry?" And I'm like, "No, I'm perfectly fine. I'm sorry." I just had like this serious face when I'm like, but I'm actually like just like this cuddly ball of like joy. I'm not serious or aloof, but that's what people think.
I,
They're like, "Oh
I
my,
think you have shown that in this interview that you're
that's
certainly
the
not aloof at
yeah."
all.
No.
And none of the other things that you said, you
But
have
people,
communicated. Oh, I know. They will look at your face and they may say, "Oh," when you're actually just tuned into your own mind at that
yeah,
moment,
It's
yeah.
because of
which
all the
is
ideas processing.
yes,
I
So
think that's what
and
many
it is.
that's
ideas.
But people
and
are
that's
always
something
like,
of creative people. Yes.
people get to know me and they're like, "Oh my God, you're such a nice person. I thought you were really mean." I'm like, "Where did you get the idea that I was?"
Right.
Oh.
No,
That's why
we
I say
certainly
it.
did. We didn't get it in this interview. No, we
No,
did not get that idea in this
that's
interview.
great.
Alicia has been having some
Oh,
technical difficulties. Repeat it, Alicia, because we
hear me?
yes, you froze for a moment there.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well,
Yes.
I'll go ahead and ask it. What book or
Okay.
books have had the most impact in your life?
Wow. Okay. That's really tough. I would say because I just read so many books as a kid. It's really, really hard to put my finger on. But I would probably have to say, mm, there's this book by Madeline L'Engle that's called A Swiftly Tilting Planet, and it was like the fourth book
Love it.
in the court. You know which one I'm talking about. It's a
Yes.
quartet that begins with
A
the
Wrinkle in Time.
A Wrinkle in Time, and then there's a Wind in the Doors. Like, and that the last one is Swiftly Tilting Planet. I would read that book every Thanksgiving for like a decade, because it just like the book there. It's problematic when you look at it now, and like some of the discussion of Indigenous people is like it wouldn't fly in today's market. But it's a book that has a lot of heart and care and consideration of the impact that like colonization and fascism and totalitarianism stuff like that have on the world, um and at the heart of it is this, this really amazing family and this boy, Charles Wallace, who's gifted and is able to like travel through time to try to fix something. And it just, it really meant a lot to me. It was a way of looking at American life that hadn't really been depicted in books before that. And so, I mean, to me, all those books are really important to me. But like, it's tougher for me with picture books because when I was a kid, the only picture book that had any kind of real connection to my culture was that Ferdinand the Bull book because it took place in Spain. So sad. There was like no
I
representation
know,
in any
I
picture
know,
book in the 70s. It's so depressing. But
I
yeah, with
It's a
know.
that,
lovely book.
It's a lovely book, but we would pull it out for Hispanic Heritage Month and put it out in the library so that everybody would know that we had one Hispanic
you
book
have
in
to
the
have that one
library
book. Yeah.
until years
So
and
this
years
is why
ago.
the work that we
Well,
all do.
it was also a burned book.
Yes, it was a banned book.
It was.
It was
It was
a
a
That's wild.
it was
so was a
burned in Germany.
a wrinkle in time. A wrinkle in time has been placed in many banned book
Yep.
lists. But
Because
then
the book,
again, banned book lists, if you look at them at some of these lists, you say to yourself,
this is what I want my
why?
kids to read. It's yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This is like
Wow.
a family acquisition. Like, here's the banned book. Okay, kids, this is what we're going to be reading
This is
this year.
it.
Let's go read banned
Let's
books,
go
everyone.
read. Let's
I
go
love it.
read.
Well, and that's why I think that the
Okay.
work that you three and everybody else in our community is doing is so essential. Because
Thank
we
you.
had experiences when we
Thank
were
you.
younger, especially those of us who are like older, but even up until recent times, that have shaped our this mission that we feel to create the books for young readers. And so I wish all of you the very best, and hopefully we will all stay in
Thank you.
touch with each other. And please count on me for anything at all that you need at any point in your career. I'm always happy to help. Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you,
David.
David. Thank you.
And thank
All
you,
right.
everybody. This ends our episode today. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you to our viewers. Have a wonderful day.
Gracias. Tlazocamati. Bye.
In the next episode, author Federica Miros.